Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Today is Season 6, Episode 4, and we're going to be talking about cornerbacks. It's just me today. John's going to come out with a Part 2, not too far after this. He's got some great prospects to look at as well. Unfortunately, by mistake, I took almost all high-profile prospects. As I say almost every episode, I don't really watch college football, so I kind of go off a list, and I thought the list was in order of how good the player was considered, kind of like that. And I happened to take a guy that was like at the bottom of the list, but he wasn't actually he wasn't very bad at all. He's considered maybe a top 6 corner in this draft by some, at least by Chris Sims for sure, because I saw him there. But anyhow, talking about corners, and let's get started with some Steelers news that has to do with corners, and it really, really sucks. It's that the Steelers cut Steven Nelson, which is really, really sad. The fact that no team wanted to trade for him, and the fact that they had to cut him is really bad for both sides. I'm pretty sure John Ledger said that exactly. And it really is, because the fact that no one wanted Steven Nelson for $8.25 million is ridiculous to me. I have no idea how the Steelers got nothing for him when he's such a good player. And I mean, the breaking point was when he tweeted, "Don't hold me hostage," and then 30 minutes later he was cut from when he tweeted that. So that was just unfortunate. I mean, I hope the best for him. I think the Steelers made a huge mistake here by not just extending him and giving him money. I think he's a $12 million cornerback. I think that they should have extended him at $12 million a year and saved some cap space this year, and that's a great way to do it. And the Steelers said no. I thought he would have been a good player to keep going. He's only 28, so, I mean, good luck to him, and I think the Steelers made a mistake. I hold no grudge against him. I would be mad, too, if the Steelers didn't want to extend me and pay me my market value. Anyhow, after that bit of news, we have a little bit small bit of news is that Cassius Marsh has agreed to a 1-year contract with the team. I don't have the details yet, but it's likely close to the minimum, if not the minimum. So it provides good outside linebacker depth in a spot where the Steelers have almost nothing behind TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. So I think it's a good move to bring him back, and yeah, I think it will be good going forward. So that leads me to my prospects, and I got 5 today. I got big and decided I want to do 5. So my prospects are Greg Newsome, the second, Radarius Williams, then Patrick Surtain, which, please bear with me, I might say his name wrong. I don't know why. Every time I look at it, I want to say Surtain. Then I have Aaron Robinson from UCF. That was the one that I thought was going to be bad, and he wasn't. And then I have J.C. Horn. So all very high-profile guys besides maybe Radarius Williams. But let us start with Greg Williams. I'm sorry, did I say Greg Williams? I meant Greg Newsome, the second. He is from Northwestern. He's 6 foot and 193 pounds. He plays outside corner. He grew up in the Chicago area, but played his senior season of football in Florida before returning home to Northwestern for college. As a freshman in 2018, he started 4 games while also only playing in 6 total due to injury. He put up 23 tackles and 4 pass breakups. Unfortunately, his 2019 season was cut short because his 2019 season was cut short as well because he only started and played in 8 of the possible 12 games of the year, making 36 tackles, having 9 pass breakups, and also a fumble recovery. In 2020, he didn't get to play many games either due to a shortened season and some injuries, but he was able to earn himself 3rd-team Associated Press All-American and 1st-team All-Big Ten anyway for his 12 tackles, an interception, and 10 pass breakups. Following his junior season and coming off a groin injury from the Big Ten championship game, he decided to declare for the draft. So we'll start with what's good about Newsome, and what's good about him to start is that he's the definition of a lockdown corner. The tape was almost boring with how little he was targeted, which I should have expected when he only had 12 tackles for 2020, but still, just a very good coverage corner that is able to mirror wide receivers really well with good footwork. He was a pass breakup machine, too, when he did get targeted, having 10 in a short season and 23 through a very short career because he has solid length. And again, he is usually right there with whatever wide receiver he was covering, and he has a good feel for where the ball is and where he should be on the play. This makes him a receiver's nightmare on contested catches. So there's that. And then another thing I was impressed with was his willingness to tackle. When he had to do it, he was throwing his entire body into there to try and make it happen. Even against the run, the very first play I watched of him versus Nebraska was a run stop, so that was nice. Kind of going along with his tackling, he takes good angles towards the play to be able to make the tackle if he has to. Now, something interesting about him is that when I was reading what others had to say about Newsome, a lot were concerned about his long speed because he remained mostly untested, but he settled that debate at his pro day where he ran an unofficial 4.38. Granted, since it's unofficial, it was likely a bit slower, but even if it's in the high 4.4s, that's not bad. So he put that conversation to rest. And the last things I'll say are that he has a very smooth back pedal, and while having a good amount of experience in zone, he has just as much experience in off man, cover 3 schemes, and press man, which I thought is where he excelled, that being press man, to be a very versatile option for a team. So what's not so good about negative is that he feels untested for a couple of reasons, and that kind of scares me. First, he's only started 18 games through his college career, which really isn't a lot. That leads to another concern, too. Injuries. Newsome didn't have a single season where he didn't get injured. The most games he played in was just 8, and that's going to be less than half of an NFL regular season pretty soon. Kind of going along with the lack of experience, Newsome doesn't trust himself in coverage sometimes, absolutely racking up penalties. He had 15 penalties in his time at Northwestern, and 7 of those came in his last 14 games, which isn't ideal. They aren't even necessarily necessary penalties either, like the one against Nebraska that brought them down to basically the goal line, which he had his man covered fine when he got that penalty. There was no reason for him to draw that. Another thing I noticed from watching offenses like Illinois' pitiful one is that he struggled to get off wide receiver blocks quite enough to make plays. He could deal with the increase in strength, especially to be able to handle NFL size and strength when it comes to block shedding. This might go along with the strength thing, but I felt like his tackling was inconsistent. Some reps he would have really solid wrap-up tackles, and others it felt like he was just throwing his body into the way and hoping it would stop them. And honestly, it worked a lot, but it's something I'm concerned about going to the next level. Another thing to point out is lack of production turnovers-wise. He only had one career interception at Northwestern. I would have liked to see him produce more on that field a few times when he was targeted. Last thing, but I did want to see him get involved more in the run game in games like against Illinois, where he knows the quarterback there is terrible. I just wish that he was a little bit more involved sometimes. So overall for Newsome, Lance Zierlein compared him to Darius Slay. To me, Newsome reminds me of a better Julian Love coming out, at least in terms of coverage. The pass breakups is what really made me make the comparison, though, as they both excelled at it. Love was just targeted more, so there's that. Newsome is almost tough to judge because he still feels a little untested. He's done great things. He's done great through the games he's played, but it really hasn't been that many games to judge off of. And even if you don't view him as untested, you're probably concerned about those injuries. I still think a team is going to take a high risk on him as his coverage skills are top tier, and he could run his own or man scheme for whatever team he plays for. Thus, I still think he'll be a late first rounder to early second round. Had it not been for his pro day, I would have thought him as more of a mid-second rounder, but he definitely has a speed. But then again, someone else's pro day kind of might have pushed him back down into the second round. We'll have to see. I'll get to that soon because newsflash, it's one of my prospects. So to get my opinion on Newsome, I watched his career highlights. I watched versus Nebraska in 2020, and I watched Illinois' offense versus Northwestern defense. So moving forward, my next prospect is Radarius Williams. He is from Oklahoma State. He is 6 foot and 193 pounds, and he plays on the outside as well. So, unbeknownst to me, before starting this, Radarius is the older brother to Greedy Williams. And yes, older. That also was that. If I wasn't surprised by him being the brother to Greedy Williams, I was surprised that he was older because he stayed in school longer. That is John's prospect, who was drafted in the second round to the Cleveland Browns back in 2019. Radarius came onto the team in 2016, but didn't play until 2017, where he got 44 tackles and 10 pass breakups through 13 games. In 2018, he recorded the first 2 picks of his college career and also got 6 other pass breakups, 49 tackles, and 2 of those being tackles for a loss through 13 starts. In his redshirt junior season in 2019, he started all 13 games and got 58 tackles, 1.5 for loss, and 6 pass breakups. In 2020, he set a school record for most consecutive starts with 48, which could have gone for longer had COVID not shortened the season. Still, he started 9 games in 2020, making 18 tackles and leading Oklahoma State in pass breakups with 7. Following his senior season, he declared for the draft. So let's start off with the positives again, because I like starting off on the good note, finishing off on the bad note. They say the best ability is availability. I said that all the time with Jesse James when he was a tight end for the Steelers, and Williams embodies that sentiment with his 48 straight career starts. Apart from being reliable, I feel like he was a really good coverage corner. He was targeted more than Newsome, especially back in 2019, but really not by much. I literally only watched him give up one completion in 2020 from the tape I watched. That doesn't mean he didn't give up a lot more in another game that I didn't watch, but he handled himself really well and against some physically challenging players that he should have likely had at least one loss to. For example, Malcolm Epps. That's who comes to mind when I think about him being a guy that he should have lost to. He was a receiver back in 2019, and he is 6'6" and over 240 pounds, and he didn't get a single catch on Williams. I have no idea how that's possible. He towers over him and is so much bigger. He's really good at mirroring and excelled on deep routes. Didn't give up much of anything and always had good positioning while being physical at the catch point to be able to break up the pass to make up for any physical deficiencies. And don't get me wrong, he isn't small. He stands at 6 foot, but he can handle guys taller than him with his positioning. Then, when he was asked, he was a serviceable tackler. Didn't really do much of it, but when he knew he had to make a tackle, he had a really good form to bring the opponent down quickly. Only missed one tackle on the tape I saw, and it was because he went low at the line of scrimmage, and an offensive lineman essentially laid down on him. So, don't go low on a lineman when you're way smaller. Anyway, last good thing about Williams is that he appeared to have solid instincts, at least definitely in 2020. There was one play against Jalen Hurts in 2019 that led to a touchdown, where it was just Jalen Hurts getting out of the pocket and running straight down the middle, and he just didn't see him. But that was the only one I saw. Otherwise, he had solid instincts and good route recognition to go with it. So, on the negative side, he is a very, very low-effort player when it comes to run defense. He had no desire to be part of a play if he thought his teammates had him, even if he was right there, resulting in an extra 3 or 4 yards on runs where if he came in and helped with his positioning, would have stopped the extra yardage. I specifically saw that in the Oklahoma game in 2020, but his lackadaisical approach to the run game occurred in all 4 games I watched, and I have no reason to believe that it would have changed in any of the other games he played in, which is a shame because, as I mentioned before, he actually was a solid tackler when he tries. So that's not the issue. I mean, some people say that he wasn't very good tackler before 2020, but honestly, even the 2019 tape wasn't bad for me, the ones I saw. But, yeah. Another big issue I had with Williams was his play strength and or block shedding ability. I swear on this, I didn't see him get off a block a single time. Once he was blocked, he was out of the play, and even worse, connecting with the other problem, if he saw it was a run down the middle, he just took the play off and let the guy block him. He had no desire to move over to help just in case, like to play that safety role. But back onto the block shedding issue, I'm not talking about playing at the line of scrimmage and getting blocked by a lineman. Wide receivers were blocking him. Everyone was blocking him. Granted, one was, again, Malcolm Epps, who is 6'6" and 253 pounds, and is now a tight end, but still, he has no ability to use his hands to get off the block and make the tackle, and teams took advantage of this. So teams knew they couldn't really target him, so what they did was stack wide receivers on his side, and then have Williams' assignment run a deep route and throw a wide receiver screen to that side, knowing that the wide receiver is going to block Williams out of the play on the deep side, and just hope that the other guy beats the other cornerback for OSU. Really, they just ran a lot of screens to his side, and even preferred running to his side, too, if they weren't running down the middle. I don't know if that has to do with just Williams. I can't say I know who their defensive end is on that side, so that could have played into it as well, but I feel like they're running to the weaker side, is the point. Last thing is that from press, man, I felt like he struggled with crossing routes a little bit, often losing a step from slow directional change. I was honestly surprised to not see more crossing routes run against him. Most of the routes run against him were just verts. Like, that's really what it felt like. It's just most teams attacked him with the verts, and it just really wasn't that effective. I thought they could have done better by getting the wide receiver to do crossing route and mesh routes, but to each their own, I suppose. So I don't really have a comp for Williams other than he slightly reminded me of a much better Lamar Jackson, the one from Nebraska that plays for the Jets, but they didn't really have that much in common in reality. Williams, to me, is frustrating. He's a really good player, it's just all about the effort. I mean, yeah, he could deal with a little bit of strength too to get off blocks easier, but more than anything, I just wonder if he's going to put in the effort at the next level. Part of me thinks he will, as there's much more on the line at the next level, but there's still a chance he just doesn't want to, and at that point, I would say he's a 4th rounder. Personally, I'm thinking he's going to go in the late round 3 with some good interviewing and convincing teams. But I mean, he could really, really convince teams that he's going to put in the effort. He could sneak into round 2, but I just don't think that's going to happen. But if he interviews poorly, I think he could more sooner fall into round 4, which honestly, I'm more leaning to late round 3 because I think he could be in round 4 way easier than he could be in round 2. But I guess that's just me. So for Williams, I watched his 2019 and 2020 highlights. I watched versus Texas in 2019. I watched versus Oklahoma in 2019. I watched the Texas offense versus Oklahoma State defense in 2020. And then I watched the Oklahoma offense versus Oklahoma State defense in 2020. So I got to see how he grew through 2 games from 2019 to 2020. I watched the same exact teams. Obviously, they changed through the draft, but I thought that was kind of interesting. It's like the first time I did that with a prospect where that just happened to happen. So that leads me to my third prospect, and that's Patrick Surtain. He's from Alabama. He is 6'2" and 208 pounds. He is an outside corner as well. And as mentioned in the episode where we did our mock drafts, Patrick Surtain II is the son of Pro Bowl cornerback Patrick Surtain. The one that played for the Dolphins and Chiefs all the way up to 2008. 13 years after he last stepped foot onto an NFL field, his son looks to get drafted and do the same. There I go. I told you, watch out for that. Surtain Jr. came out of high school in Florida as a top 10 recruit and decided to join the Crimson Tide. As a freshman in 2018, he saw immediate playing time, starting 12 of 15 games, putting up 37 tackles, 1.5 for a loss, an interception, and 7 pass breakups, which is enough to get him SEC, all-freshman team recognition. In 2019, Surtain started all 13 games and put up 42 stops, 2 interceptions, 8 pass breakups, and 3 forced fumbles, building on his strong freshman campaign. In 2020, he came on the strongest, starting all 13 games again, including the championship game in which his team won, and he got 38 tackles, 3.5 for a loss, an interception, and a team-leading 12 pass breakups through those 13 games. Not only become a national champion, but a first-team Associated Press All-American and the SEC Defensive Player of the Year. So, going into the positives, I mean this quite literally. Surtain may be the most complete prospect I ever looked at, ever, for any position. It doesn't matter. I looked at guys like Tua, Kyler Murray, and tons of other first-rounders through the years, but no one was this complete. Honestly, it's probably wasting your time to tell you what's good about him, because he's essentially good at everything. To start, he is the tallest corner I looked at today at 6'2", which gives him excellent coverage range. Then in coverage, he basically runs the receiver's route. It's insane. Even on the breaks, he has such a quick, short area movement that it's like he's running right with them, and it's all over the field. It doesn't matter. Quarterbacks quite literally stopped looking his way because of it. He was targeted maybe 3 times a game on average, and on those targets, it was usually a bad idea because he has shown to be a good at breaking up the pass and being really solid at taking the ball away. I mean, let's be real. For a guy that's coverage is locked down, and more so than my other prospects, it's pretty impressive that he finished with more interceptions than any of them, which I guess is kind of a spoiler, but regardless, less than him on average. Then you could tell he's been coached up by his father with the amount of discipline, patience, and focus he plays with when watching him. Because I forgot to mention, he actually played some ball for his father when his father was a coach at his high school. I meant to say that, but he knows where his responsibilities lie, and he could stay attached without distraction. The focus especially. He can have his back to the quarterback and still somehow locate the ball and challenge the pass even without seeing. When he does see it, though, it's his best. It's at his best because he has the plus leaping abilities, and it's going to make it so that there's no size disadvantage for him at the NFL level. He will be able to get up there with the tallest receivers. Then when he has to tackle, he is willing. Not just in the passing game. He made some run stops. He is a high motor guy, so he will come from the outside corner spot all the way to the middle of the field to play safety, quote unquote, in case his guys can't get a man down. He is also not afraid to run downhill and throw his body into it. He had a hit that was on his highlight reel that was so nice where he did exactly that. He has this desirable strength too. He did 18 bench press reps at his pro day, which for a cornerback is really good. It helps him get off his blocks and to come to make tackles even when he's not the one targeted on the play. I could really go on and on, but the last thing I wanted to mention is that he has 38 straight starts to end his college career. He can most definitely handle an NFL season. There is so much more to talk about, but I could keep going. If you have any questions about Patrick Surtain that I didn't address that maybe you have concerns about, he's just so good. He has the speed too. I didn't really say anything about the speed. He has the speed. That's not an issue either. So, going to negatives, there's really not much. I think he's got to work on not making contact before the ball gets to the receiver for the NFL level, because I felt like he got away with a few in college that he wouldn't have at the NFL level. It was more in the 2019 film I watched of his, but still, it's something to work on. I think that might be one of his biggest disadvantages, and that's really it. While definitely more involved than my other prospects in the sense that he actually works over to the play even when he's on the outside and the plays on the inside, he could get involved more in helping his teammates tackle. Then Alabama used him on a blitz a couple times, I think, and that is completely wasting his talent. Granted, it was only a couple times, but he will not be the next Mike Hilton in that regard. He wasn't a very good blitzer. That is what you could say about Surtain being bad at. Last thing is he trusted his skills on the inside a lot in college often playing to the outside first, and then might get attacked on the next level while it worked, because meanwhile it worked in college. So that's something to consider. He really trusted his inside speed, acceleration, and change of direction speed, maybe to a fault. It didn't hurt him in college. He's just so fast, and his recognition is so quick that it didn't hurt him there. But I think maybe against NFL level players, it could be a detriment. So he might have to just break that confidence in himself. I don't even know. I'm literally making confidence a negative. So I mean this when I say this. I felt like I was watching a future All-Pro. There isn't much to comment on when it comes to the bad things. His worst game I saw was the game against Florida where he gave up that touchdown to Grimes. But even then, that play was 100% offensive pass interference in my mind. But he matched up against Kyle Pitts and actually did well. Not just survived, thrived. That's a big dude, Kyle Pitts. And that's where I say where he could handle NFL size, because Kyle Pitts is a big dude. I forget if he's 6'5" or 6'6". Still got either a 4 or 5 inch height advantage over Surtain. So it's crazy. Surtain is just so good. And what's crazier to me is that Surtain isn't the consensus number one cornerback in this class. In fact, I even saw him as the third best cornerback in this class. And people are now making a push for someone else to be even above that. So, kind of crazy, but I really need to watch McFarley tape in my free time, because if people think he is better, McFarley must be insane. Because it's not just a few people. A good amount of people think Caleb McFarley from Virginia Tech is very good. Unfortunately, he's not one of the prospects I looked at today. I wanted to be slightly realistic and look at guys that had a chance. I want to look at some guys that had a chance to fall to the Steelers. That's kind of bad coming off of look at Surtain, because Surtain is a top 10 pick. Or at least he should be, because no spoiler, but Surtain is my favorite of all the corners here. He's quite literally my favorite prospect ever. His tape is just so good. I can't believe he fell to me in my first mock draft. I can't believe that happened on the PFF mock draft simulator. Somehow I knew he was going to be good, and I was like, I had to take him in my mock draft even before we cut Steven Nelson. So if Surtain falls to us, I might have tears for joy, honestly. He's again, my favorite prospect ever. I've been doing this for I think 4 or 5 years now. To gather my opinion on Surtain, I watched a lot. Because I was just in love. I was having such a fun time watching him. I watched his highlights. I watched versus Georgia in 2020. I watched versus Florida in 2020. I watched versus Michigan in 2019, which was technically in 2020 because it happened in January of 2020, but 2019 season. I watched the LSU offense versus the Alabama defense in 2020. I watched the Notre Dame offense versus Alabama defense in 2020, and then all of his 2019 season targets. So I got a good opinion on Surtain. I feel like I have a really good feel for him right now, and this is why I feel confident saying that he's going to be good. at the next level. I think so. I hope I'm not wrong. I hope he doesn't prove me wrong, because obviously it always happens. Okuda was never supposed to be bad in his first season, and he was picked third overall, and Surtan's not even expected to go that high, so you never know. Guys can be bad, but to me, I think Surtan is he's the rarest prospect I ever looked at. With his height and everything combined, it's just crazy. So, anyway, that brings me to my next prospect, which is kind of hard to compete with Surtan after all that, but that's Aaron Robinson from UCF. He is 6 foot and 190 pounds. He is a slot inside guy and actually has some outside in certain packages, but he mostly played in the slot. He was the guy that I thought would be bad on tape, but he is not very bad. He's kind of a more high-profile guy. Similar to Surtan, Aaron Robinson was a top 20 prospect coming out of high school in Florida, just like Surtan. That decided to become part of the Crimson Tide. As a true freshman, he played in 13 games and got 5 tackles and 1 for a loss. After the 2016 season, he decided to transfer back to his home state and enroll at UCF, where he would play the rest of his college career. After sitting out 2017 due to NCAA rules, he came back to the football field in 2018 and played in 7 games as a reserve and got 9 tackles. In 2019, he started 10 of 13 games and got recognized as a second-team All-AAC pick for his 54 tackles, 5.5 for a loss, 3 interceptions, and 10 pass breakups. In 2020, Robinson was again a second-team All-AAC honoree for his 41 tackles and 1 tackle for a loss through his 9 starts. Following his senior season, he's declared for the draft. So, what's good about Aaron Robinson is that he's a Swiss Army knife of cornerbacks. He played in a mixed scheme where he got to see time as both a man cover corner and zone cover corner, which was interesting because until I watched the Houston game, I thought he was mostly man, but it felt like the entire game against Houston, they played his own defense. Regardless, point is he could run both. That's not the only thing I mean by versatility, though. He played predominantly slot corner, but he was moved to outside in certain packages, like ones where there was only 2 wide receivers on the field, 2 corners on the field, and then he was one of them. There was just 2 wide receivers split out wide. That's just one example, though. He played outside corner a few times and can in a pinch if necessary. There's some talks that he might actually just switch to outside corner at the next level, but last thing on the versatility is that he has potential as a blitzer, as probably the best one I saw out of my prospects. He has some stuff to work on, but I saw some good things from his blitzing when schemed properly. Essentially, he could do it all, if asked. As a tackler, Robinson was very willing, and surprisingly, despite being the technical smallest corner I looked at today, standing at 6 foot and only 190, while my other corners were bigger than that, just pounds-wise, really, but he was... I'm sorry. He played with high play strength and a really good block shedding ability. That's what I was trying to say. Sorry. Receivers had a really tough time blocking him, and he had good vision past the block to be able to get off it and make a tackle if needed. I felt like it came from the blitzing experience because he was a solid hand fighter, honestly. Going back to his strength, though, he actually hits pretty hard, too. He was able to jar some balls loose with just his hits alone on tape, and he'll come downfield to make it. He looked for quite a few tackles for a loss when he was playing. So on the negative side of things, I had some problems with this man coverage. Firstly, curls absolutely destroyed him. I don't think he trusts his speed at all because there were a few plays like against Memphis where he started running backward as soon as the ball snapped when he was playing 5 or more yards off, and I expected a long ball, and he was expecting a long ball, but got destroyed by a curl route. Granted, his acceleration may actually be an issue. UCF's Pro Day isn't until April 1st, so we won't know for another week, but I felt like that's why he didn't trust his speed. He can't accelerate, and this is going to get him burnt at the NFL level on more routes than just curls if he just starts running deep like that. My next problem with his man coverage was he was way too willing to give up the inside. And combining that with his seemingly bad acceleration, mesh routes messed him up too. And it was really bad if another guy's route got in the way, as on like rub routes, and it knocked him off. It made him fall behind by a lot because he couldn't see it. He wasn't really looking in front of himself, which honestly you shouldn't be looking in front. But he really got messed up by rub routes. They did that more on him than I saw really against anyone else. Anyhow, I don't think he has the instincts or play recognition to make up for the deficiency, at least it didn't seem like it, so that's a problem. Moving to other issues, the looking for tackles for a loss is a double-edged sword. I saw multiple times on tape him leaving his assignment too early to try and get a scrambling quarterback, and it didn't work out on several occasions, as Robinson leaving his man typically opened that guy up, and the quarterback was able to get the ball off. He seemingly struggled with the same problem in zone 2, though. It's a little tougher to understand where his zones were and how big they were, but I felt like there were times he came off a guy in his zone a little too early. Lastly, as I mentioned, he isn't a perfect blitzer. He lost the ball on one of the blitzes and needs to be able to find it better. It also has to be better at securing tackles when flying in fast. So overall with Robinson, his versatility is interesting, but I think he's best suited for the nickel role personally. I think with some work on tape study while also improving as a blitzer, it could really do wonders for him. He could even become the next Mike Hilton if he gets good enough. Funny enough, that's not the Steelers corner he reminded me of. He actually reminded me more of Cameron Sutton coming out. And even funnier, that's not the Steelers corner that he reminded Lance Zierlein of. Lance Zierlein compared him to Steven Nelson. I just see Sutton because of the heights being similar, running the same, and Sutton's versatility coming out of Tennessee. For Robinson, though, a lot of people have him as a second rounder, but part of me feels like he could fall into the third round. He kind of feels like a jack of all trades, but really a master at none at the moment. So while his options with teams will remain open, I think he may go a little later than expected in the early third round. So this is the guy that Chris Sims has a top 6 corner, and I wasn't expecting that. So Sims, you might be crazy sometimes. His lists are usually different than other people, but what's crazy is he's usually right because he watches tape. He actually watches tape and forms an opinion. Granted, sometimes his opinions are wrong, but I do the same thing. I've watched guys and I've been completely wrong about them. So yeah, so take that as you will. Chris Sims thinks he's a top 6 corner in this draft. So I'm sticking to my guns and saying that he's going to go in the third round. Part of me feels like that. So I watched his career highlights. I watched versus Cincinnati in 2020. I watched versus Memphis in 2020. And then I watched the Houston offense versus the UCF defense in 2020 to gather my opinion. And that takes me to my final prospect. And I'm going to do this one a little bit differently. I kind of didn't want to write as much for him because it was kind of short. Like, I kind of had an opinion on him, but I felt like I could just go off the dome. So that's J.C. Horn from South Carolina. He is 6'1", 205 pounds, and he is mostly outside corner. He has some slot experience. I saw him move there a couple times, but he is a mostly outside corner. And Horn is the second prospect today with NFL bloodlines. JC's dad is former Chiefs, Saints, and Falcons wide receiver Joe Horn, who last played in 2007 and was a Pro Bowl with the Saints in the early 2000s. Just a fun fact, also, if you don't know Joe Horn's story, definitely look it up. That man's got a really, really cool story on how he made it into the NFL and got drafted and worked his way into there. So, if you're not familiar with it, please go look it up. I think it's on his Wikipedia, honestly, but yeah, it's really cool. For JC, though, he chose to go a somewhat different path, choosing to be a cornerback, where he joined the South Carolina Gamecocks for the 2018 season. As a true freshman, he started 10 of 11 games and got 45 tackles, 4 for a loss, 2 sacks, and 8 pass breakups, which was enough to earn him SEC All-Freshman Team recognition and a co-winner of South Carolina's Most Productive Defensive Player Award. In 2019, he was South Carolina's best defensive player again and started all 12 games, getting 40 tackles, 2 for a loss, a sack, 9 pass breakups, and 2 forced fumbles. For 2020, he played and started the first 7 games, but then his head coach got fired, and he chose to opt out for the last 3 to prepare for the NFL draft. He was still able to earn second-team all-conference for his 16 tackles, 1 for a loss, 2 interceptions, and 6 pass breakups, though, and following that season, he declared for the draft. So, the biggest thing about J.C. Horn is his athletic ability is almost unique. It is rare. It is insane. So, there are people that look to score how people do in the combine per position. They give him a grade. They look at his times compared to his height and all that, and they give him an overall athletic grade. It's called an RAS score. It's graded out of 10. He got a 10 out of 10. He is ranked number 1 out of 1,748 cornerbacks between 1987 to 2021 because of his athletic abilities. Now, here's what I'm going to say. Because we only get pro days this year, I don't think he would remain number 1. I think with a combine, he would fall, but not very far. I think he's still an athletic freak. I don't think he's the most freaky there is. I'm pretty sure his 40 time would come down. Not sure about the bench press, but I think I'm pretty sure the 40 time would go down, and that would make it. He is probably still top 20 though. Out of those 1,748, he is still probably top 20. Jury's out on if he's really number one. He honestly could be. He's an athletic freak. I just want you to hear this. So he's 6'1", which immediately gets him an RAS of 8.8, like out of 10. Then at 205, that gives him 9.48. His bench being at 19, he had a 19 bench press. This man is strong as hell. That gives him a 9.26, which is in the elite range as well. Everything's going to be in the elite range. I don't know why I'm going to tell you that. He had a vert of 41.5, which is insane. That was actually the highest RAS he got at 9.88. That's just insane. His broad jump was 11.01, which got him a 9.81, which is also considered insane. Then his 40-yard dash was 4.39, so sub 4.4, at least on the unofficial pro day. His 20-yard split was a 2.56, and his 10-yard split was a 1.52. All in all, sick. Absolutely sick, with the athletic ability. He is an athlete. More than anything, he is an athlete. So he's insane, and honestly, he's a really decent player. I'm not going to do positives and negatives, I should say, but I'm going to start talk about it in general and kind of go from there. So that is the first thing I want to get out of the way, that he's an insane athlete that teams are going to want to work with. Now, here's my problem. People are a lot higher on him because of that, but he is kind of raw. Granted, I want to put this out there first. South Carolina's defense kind of sucked. Like, watching them, there was a lot of busted coverages, and there were a few points where I was like, wow, J.C. Horn sucked on that play, and then I rewatch and I'm like, oh no, wait, he tried his best, and he tried his best, and then someone else broke coverage. I forget which game I watched in. Oh, I think it was Ole Miss. So, a game against Ole Miss, I watched the play originally, I'm like, wow, he got burnt by his guy, and then I saw that there was a wide open guy on the top right, too, and I'm like, wait a minute, I replayed it, it was for a touchdown, I replayed it, and J.C. Horn's guy was the guy on the right, and a linebacker, number 53, I remember that specifically, because I had to keep watching, was the one that made the mistake on the play, and didn't follow the man all the way up the field, and J.C. Horn actually came off his guy to try and stop it, but he didn't, so he wasn't able to, because, I mean, it's not his man. It just happened to be that he was in the area. So, there are plays where I couldn't really tell that J.C. Horn was actually the problem. That one I specifically saw that he wasn't, but they had a lot of busted coverages, and J.C. Horn gave up a lot of touchdowns. He was targeted a lot. He's not like the other prospects. Teams were willing to challenge J.C. Horn, and it sometimes worked. That's what makes me feel uncomfortable. Like, I feel like he's a little raw. He shows some good abilities. I'm not going to take that away from him. He's not just that he's an athlete. He's not completely dopey out there. He made some good tackles, but even then, his tackling is inconsistent. That's kind of how I viewed it. Like, his tackling is inconsistent for a guy that's considered that had 19 bench press reps, which is likely going to be the strongest corner in the draft. I mean, I guess someone could overtake him, but will likely be the strongest cornerback in the draft. Like, I felt like his abilities to hand fight weren't very good. Like, I don't really know how to put it other than that he's just kind of raw. Like, it feels like he has more learning to do. Like, I want to see more hand fighting from him. I want to learn to see him use his strength more. I want to see him get more involved in the running game. Honestly, he was actually pretty involved in, like, tackling against the run. He did kind of come over, but there were times where I'm just like, I wanted to see him get involved more. It's kind of like Surtain, where I'm like, he kind of came over sometimes, but it was more, again, it was inconsistent there too. It was like, sometimes he'd come over, sometimes he wouldn't. I think it's kind of, he's burdened with being their best player, so he kind of, I feel like he can't, like, take a play off, like, at all, like, ever, which no player should, but it is kind of tough for him to ask him to do everything. So I don't want to, like, harp on the guy too much, but I don't know. It's just like watching him play wasn't as good as I want it to be. Incredible athlete. When I saw his pro day, I was not surprised, because his pro day actually happened after I watched his tape. But But honestly, that blew me away with just how good his pro day was. I think that overall, with J.C. Horn, I think he's going to go in the first round. I don't know if his play is first round play. I think he's going in the first round for a team that wants to take him to try and develop him because this is what I'm going to say. Because of his athletic traits, because of all this, he has the highest ceiling of every cornerback in this draft. Granted, maybe Caleb McFarley is also insane because I actually don't know much about him. But J.C. Horn has the highest ceiling because of all the intangibles that he has that other cornerbacks likely can't match. I just don't know if he's going to reach that potential. He also might have not the lowest floor of all the cornerbacks in the draft. He might have the lowest floor of all of the cornerbacks I looked at today, though. And I don't know. It makes me a little bit scared for him. But that being said, I still think he's a first rounder. That pro day was insane. A team is going to take advantage of that and try and make that. And he can turn out really good. As I said, that ceiling is incredibly high. If a team sits and develops him. Now, here's the thing. Here's what I'm going to say that I do want to include. He does need to develop. I don't think he's going to be a starter immediately. He gives me like Artie Burns vibes, where like he'd be best off if he was an immediate starter and he has some stuff to work on because Artie Burns coming out was raw as well. I think that J.C. Horn is actually less raw, so I think Artie Burns was way more raw coming out. So take that as you will. Artie Burns went at, I believe, 28, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 25. I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly what pick we had when we took Artie Burns, but if Artie Burns was worthy of a first round pick, J.C. Horn is definitely worthy of a first round pick because I felt like his tape was better. That being said, to get my opinion on him, I watched his 2020 highlights. I watched versus Auburn 2020, which Auburn 2020 was definitely his best game. He played insane with the pass breakups and stuff. Oh man, was insane. 2 interceptions in that game, absolutely nutty. I'm honest. I think that both of his interceptions and 4 of the pass breakups he had on the year in 2020 were from Auburn. That's why. Like when I watched Auburn 2020, I'm pretty sure that was the first one I watched. I was coming in hot. I was like, wow, the cornerbacks in this class are good. But then I came down after that because that was literally where he kind of padded most of those stats, like the really good ones, the pass breakups and the interceptions. I then watched the LSU offense versus South Carolina defense in 2020. I watched versus Texas A&M versus South Carolina defense in 2020. And I watched the Ole Miss offense versus South Carolina defense 2020, which I think the Ole Miss game was his worst game. Like that was not his best showing, in my opinion, even with the busted coverages not being on him. So, that being said, I would like to rank my prospects, and you know who number 1 is. Patrick Surtain, there are no words necessary, he is worth trading up for. If he is there at 16, somehow, some way, if I've really misjudged this, I'm about trading up for him. He's worth it. I know that the Steelers have so many holes to cover, but again, I view this team as a team that can compete. You need to build, and I think that Surtain would be worth trading up for to build for later, to be a competitive team later. I'm not drafting really for now, in my opinion, if Surtain is there. Which, if Surtain is taken, I'm sure it's probably better to just take guys for this year and try to compete, but if Surtain is there, I'm about it. After Surtain, it's kind of interesting. I don't know how I feel about these guys. They kind of all come in pretty close. So after Surtain, because of where I think he's going to go, I'm about Radarius Williams. Now, I know I said a lot of bad things about him, but I really have a feeling he's going to go in the 4th round. And I think he might even be there for the Steelers pick, even though it's a really late pick in the 4th round. I liked that he was available. I think that he can be coached up. I think that the effort can be changed. NFL coaches are going to yell at him. And NFL coaches are going to be like, do you want to be here? We will cut your ass. Do you want to be here? And I think it's going to kick him into gear and make him want to make money. And so I think that as a project player from the 4th round, I'm a fan of Radarius Williams if he's in the 4th round. 3rd round, not so much, which he could go in the 3rd round, and absolutely not in the 2nd round. If he's in the 2nd round, that would be an awful decision. So after Radarius Williams, after Patrick Surtain and Radarius Williams, again, it's just kind of how do I view these guys? So for me, my personal opinion is I like Aaron Robinson's versatility. I think that Aaron Robinson's versatility, where he could possibly develop into the next Mike Hilton, he could play slot or inside, really helps. I think that having another Cameron Sutton type, where he can play inside outside, would be really, really good, and it kind of gives you more options for cornerback this year if he can do that. So the price tag for Robinson is a little high. I will not lie. The second round, I'd be okay with. I'd hope that, I don't think he's going to fall that far in the third round. I think he's an option if the Steelers want to trade back in the second round, I think that would be a great option if he's still there. Granted, he could go even earlier than that. He could go earlier than the Steelers pick, and it might not even be a trade up option. So I still have him as the next prospect because of that. Now, after that, I have J.C. Horn. So if we were ranking this by who's the Steelers most likely to pick, Horn is number one. Horn is on the table for pick 24. I'm just not a fan of it. I think that taking him would be a mistake, honestly. But it's exactly what the Steelers would do. If J.C. Horn is there at 24, that is exactly who the Steelers are going to pick. I would almost bet money on it, because the Steelers love an athletic guy that they could develop, and it usually, for the most part, it's worked out. But I'm just not been a fan, because you could do better rather than betting on a guy that's probably not that good and deserving. For example, like Terrell Edmunds. I love Terrell Edmunds now, and he worked out. He's an athletic freak coming out, and that's a great pick. But you could have gone Jesse Bates. And for later, you could have taken someone else. You could have traded back and taken Terrell Edmunds. It's the risk the Steelers like to take. Bud Dupree, same thing. Actually, Bud Dupree wasn't supposed to be there for the Steelers pick, but he was just an athletic freak, and his tape might have not been that good because there was a lot of speed and not a lot of power, but Bud Dupree obviously worked out. Artie Burns is one that didn't. Artie Burns, they took that risk where they said, okay, well, he's a little bit raw. He definitely needs some time, but we're going to take that risk, and it didn't work out. It didn't work out there. But then you have Ryan Shazier. Ryan Shazier also worked out. Other than his injury, which you can't prevent that, he worked out. He was an athletic freak that was so good. So most of the time, it works out. Maybe not as good as like Bud Dupree. You get more of a Terrell Edmunds, but Terrell Edmunds is a solid player now. And it's also someone that needs time to show their stripes. That's also the problem. If you're drafting J.C. Horn, he needs to develop. If he starts immediately, he's going to be trashed on by fans just like Terrell Edmunds did, just like Artie Burns did, just like everyone that the Steelers drafted, Bud Dupree, just like all these guys that drafted that needed time to develop, and you knew that coming out, and were just athletic freaks like they all do. And so if we do draft J.C. Horn, I'm going to give him time. And that's why he's not last, is because he can be a great player with his intangibles. I'm just not a fan of doing that. I'm kind of tired of taking that risk on guys where it's like athletic freak. I want a guy like an Antoine Winfield. I was a huge fan of Antoine Winfield last year. Didn't have the intangibles. Was really short, but he played amazingly and helped take his team to a Super Bowl. Amazing. And that's kind of what I prefer. J.C. Horn, though, this is like the number one guy that I looked at the Steelers ranked. And that leaves just Newsome for last. So Newsome is really good. I just don't like the price tag on him at all. I'm scared about his lack of playing time. That really scares me, and the injuries really scare me. Maybe I'm just scared from Senquez Golson, but it's also looking at the teams he played with Northwestern. Like the games I watched were versus Nebraska and versus Illinois, and Illinois offense is awful. That was really tough to watch. His highlights weren't all that impressive. I don't know. I would be really sad if this is our first round pick. I think that he is likely now not a first rounder anymore with J.C. Horn doing what he did at his pro day. He's probably likely early second. So if the Steelers reached on him for their first round pick, I'd be even worse off than if they reached on J.C. Horn. Newsome would be a guy that I would look at as a trade back option. If the Steelers wanted to trade back all the way into the second round and it got them something good, Newsome would be a guy to take early in the second round. Honestly, right now, just off the bat, I think that he might be drafted by the Jets with their second pick in the second round. I think that's like almost exactly where he's going to go because the Jets need a cornerback, and I don't know if they'll take a cornerback at 23. Honestly, the Jets might take J.C. Horn at 23 because he's probably going to be the best corner available. They're definitely not letting certain run past him, I don't think. But regardless, yeah, this was a very interesting episode. I was really excited watching all my guys for the most part. And I wouldn't say I disliked any of them. I might not like their value. I might not like where they're predicted or where I'm predicting them to go. But guys always drop. You never know. So, unfortunately, I probably don't have one of the Steelers prospects. I really didn't want to do it this way this year. Because John always gets the Steelers prospects because John spreads it out. John will look at a top tier guy, like 2 mid tier guys, and a bottom tier guy, and usually it helps him hit more. And I've been doing kind of like spurts. Like I'll do it like, okay, look at like all these second round guys because it's what I want, but it's not what the Steelers are always going to do. So I didn't want to do this episode this way. I hope I'm wrong, but I likely have not looked at a single Steelers prospect today that will be for them. I don't know. Maybe that's just being pessimistic, but yeah. It's kind of nuts. Kind of nuts that these guys that like their dads were playing in the NFL right when I was becoming a fan, like they're now coming in, but yeah, look for John's part 2 of this. He will be doing 4 prospects. He's got some interesting ones, and hopefully he has one of the guys that the Steelers will be looking at going to this year. But yeah, everybody, have a good night and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.